Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Reviews where today we're going to be checking out a couple of tracks from an act named Orkle. And if we switch over to here, we have them on the screen. Well, we've got the first one here. This is titled Iron Grave, so we're going to listen through each of these two tracks today from start till finish. And we're going to hear what we think. Let's go. Phenomenal use of dynamic range. Interesting use of flanger or phasing. I mean, it's wonderfully mysterious with the theremin lead there. It's kind of wondrous with how it soars with the major interval like that. Maybe like for a 9-minute 40 track, for the atmosphere just to be held like that. I mean, it's already as long as a lot of tracks that are released nowadays. And how the synths surround the stereo field. Not all at the same time though. Drums? I mean, it's actually hypnotic, isn't it? I mean, are those synth organs that we've got going on now? Interesting tone to the snares as well. I can hear how it kind of it's got a kind of a fragmented feel to it. I like the samples and how they cut into the mix to switch around with legato of a lot of the other elements. Oh, we're looping back, right. And that's it. No, it just stops at silence. Is this the third act? Sub bass is potent though, isn't it? Really fantastic sound design. You can kind of imagine a submarine going through the water with its sonars going off. We keep rising towards this really sort of shimmery layer on top. That which is the main constant in this piece, aside from the sub bass. Interesting use of filtering on the drums to keep them subtle in the mix. Starting to gradually grow. There's a really sort of savage rattle to the kit. The contrasts with the smoothness of these synths. So what time signature do we have there? Is it 4/4? Is it 5/4? Is it a polymeter? So with this track, Orkle, from Orkle, called Irongrave, I feel as if I'm having more of a journey with the atmosphere rather than solely with the music itself, if that makes sense. What I mean to this, and this is an instrumental track, so you're literally taking everything you can from the variety of backing instruments, which are not backing anything else, I suppose. But you get your influences from that. With Iron Grave and the fact that you can see a submarine on a cover, I'm wondering if this has to do with the fact that there is a submarine going through the water. It's your experiences or interpretations of the submarine itself, how it sounds, etc. Either the grace it brings from the wonderment with the high shimmery synths, or the siren sounds of the flanging and phasing that we had earlier on there with trying to sort of find itself, inevitably getting to a point where we have drum grooves there, the bass firm, and we have the sequencer, that melodic sequencer, which is sort of just like kind of bring things down to a close with a bit of a hint of menace there. I think the lack of vocals did this track well. I mean, at 9 minutes 40, there was a lot to appreciate here from the fact that things were really well leveled, but it was also just the sound design with the sub-bass resonance and stuff like that within the synths. The drums had a unique sort of tone to them that I hadn't really heard a lot of. They didn't sound clean or over-processed. They kind of made that midway point there where I think I could tell that they were probably, but there's like a ping-pong delay or something like that on them, which it kind of gave that kind of tone to them but with a much shorter interval because I can't get a brah. And then the peaks and troughs that we had, the dynamic range was fantastic, and like there were some parts again, like the da 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 da, going up an octave occasionally to switch things up. That were fascinating as well. There were certain elements that stayed for most, if not the whole way through. Apart from that massive pause at like the 6 minute mark, which I thought was divine. It's nice to have that resolution, especially when things come up dynamically, to then be able to go back down and sort of like fill them up on their own. I'll talk about it more in the conclusion just in case there are similarities, but I think this is a fantastic first impression of their work, and it makes me excited for what we had next. And it was a well spent 9 minutes 40. And then we've got track number 2 for today, Stellar Express. Let's go. It does kind of sound like a choo-choo train, doesn't it? The little whistles. No. It's got a hell of funkiness to it, actually. Almost chiptune-ish. Because it's not just the sound design, the fact that things went from right to the left down the headphones of the train go, with the horn and stuff like that. It's the fact that we managed to get instruments to sound like a train. And it's the fact that we managed to also combine the more, I'm not sure how much of this is kind of the 8-bit, 16-bit groove, but it's just a fantastic aesthetic that's held by the China cymbals on the left side there going shh, shh, bop, bop, bop. It's just a peppy lead on top. Almost sort of slap bass octave routines there. And of course, then we got the train coming back. It was kind of neat to also change the tempo there for a bit, allow things to kind of speed up a little bit. You don't get a lot of that in modern music. A lot of people are similarly like, we're going to be 140 BPM for the entire time, but yeah, we don't have that. It's very free. I mean, it's stellar if it was sound design. It's some of the best I've heard inside a song, to be honest. There's something kind of unusual about the way these are put together that I quite like. It's like they sound like they should be, the textures sound like they should be in different songs, but somehow they're niched together. And that mutation, or the decay of that synth is just wild enough. We got triplets with 16ths there as well, rhythmically. It's such a busy, frenetic piece that still doesn't seem to take itself too seriously. I mean, the fact that you can kind of figure out what the track is about without even necessarily even needing to know the name, just hearing the sound effects, it's very promising. You don't always get that. I'm just not used to tracks ending like that. It's kind of nice as well that we seem to want to split our track into thirds. This being the final act, of course. And it just fades out like that. It's such a surreal experience for me, because I very rarely hear music like this. I'm kind of in awe of it. Part of me is like, this is incredibly intelligent music because it's not just the choo-choo train sounds you heard, it's also the context of why the train was speeding up and then it's slowing down and then you hear the train again. And then you've got these kind of polymetric or sort of like rhythmic elements here kind of going against each other with chord notes moving forward. Like slower sort of halftime ones potentially. Like clearly the Foley and the sound design were highlights there, but it was also just the track that you had different ideas introduced there that simultaneously showed off the meter of the person's ability, of the composer's ability as a musician and songwriter, was to also just, again, it's not avant-garde, it's not even experimental, it just seems like we're doing something to create an aesthetic, a tone that matches the title of the song without needing to sort of like double check it. There's nothing too alien in this. There's no like crazy accidentals or chromaticism or anything like that, even if there are things outside the sort of instantiated, key or scale at the start, it still makes sense because of how things have been niched together. I'm very impressed, but let's have a talk about that more in the conclusion. And welcome to the conclusion of my review of these tracks. These two songs from Orkle, titled Iron Grave and Stellar Express. So Iron Grave was, I think, about a submarine, and there was a sense of danger about the entirety of it. Some parts it came a sort of a bit magic, a little bit sort of like majorish, but ultimately it was mostly sort of minor parts there, which indicates harmonically that we're in for a bit of a sad time. But it also seems like throughout the entirety of Iron Grave, from what I got, just from what I think it's about through listening to it, you're going on a journey to learn more about it. Like, you get away from the submarine, but then it comes back. And we had a similar situation, I think, with Stellar Express, where we heard the choo-choo train sounds with the chick, then the brrrr, and then it goes across the screen with the panning, stereo panning being really well handled there with the automation of that as well. But it's also just the really intriguing, incredibly creative approaches to the way we sort of niche different instruments together with textures and tones that I wouldn't necessarily be familiar with hearing. Like, individually I've heard sounds like this before, but it's more like the different, whatever we were using to make them, there were 5 different instruments, and we somehow managed to niche them in a way where I think maybe due to the mastering chain, they connected and they sort of glued a little bit. Not too much, there was a sense of separation, but things were so well leveled in the post-production that you had no issues with that at all. The 2 songs didn't feature any vocals, so there's no need to talk about, the actual vocal performance, but I will note that I got a sense of the stories from the titles themselves and then listening, of course, to the songs themselves. So you're going to figure it out. You had 2 for 2, so I think in that regard it's a success. But both of these tracks were very long. I mean, like, Iron Grave was almost 10 minutes, this was 7. And so for me personally, when I listen to tracks like these, I think, okay, what are we going to do to make them worth that while? Because you cannot guarantee that a listener is going to want to sit there listening to your track for 10 minutes. So what I think Iron Grave did phenomenally well is that they slowly brought in the volume there. They automatically cut off a percentage of the people who might listen to it that just want quick, easy entrances to the songs. They just want, oh, bam, I want that hook, I want that kind of dopamine lift. This isn't the music for you. If you're wanting instant satisfaction, this is not the music for you. It's great music, but you have to kind of sit with it and absorb it and kind of see where it's going and take the journey that it's traveling on. And I think in that regard, Orkle absolutely nailed it. We had several ideas within each track that were distinctive and unique to each other, was still sharing a similar sort of approach with like the synthetic instruments we were using, as well as a focus on sort of uncanny sort of like drums there with the bass and everything else sort of symphonying along as well. I think that if I talk about a few of the favorite instruments I had within this, it was simply the synths are number 1, because it wasn't just that we had really lush, wonderful pads and leads and sequences and stuff like that, which was sort of positioned in a point like from the stereo field, but in the frequency spectrum, should I say, like things that there were some lows and some mids and high parts, but there were also there was a simultaneous sense of minimalism with not oversaturating the effect and finding a home for everything, whilst also allowing there to be more of a sort of a build, or for things to go away entirely, like when we had those pauses. It was almost like for us when we were composing it for Orkle, it was almost like we were going to say, look, we just want this person to become familiar with the initial concept, and then we get little changes over the way. We might add an extra instrument or whatever, but we never sort of like abruptly adjusted things in a way that was detrimental. It was a very smooth experience, even though there were some uncomfortable interval choices there that I think were chosen primarily because of the fact that it either sounded a little bit sort of mystical or out of the box or niche, or it simply communicated the dire nature of the situation. There were like siren sounds that we had in Iron Grave, which I thought, again, that was sort of like synth parts. They were sort of created and patched so that they would behave like that. We had interesting dub kind of like bass parts there, which were kind of looping their patterns, but they were going between the sides of the stereo field. And so you just had this instrument there that was filling up so much space because it had this sort of interesting, subtle sense of pace to it that allowed everything else to build upon it. And when a song is interesting, which is 1 or 2 things that play, and even better, like add with the rest, or it also had parts where it was nothing. It goes to show the capacity that Orkle has within all facets with these synthesizers. And again, trying to get the train sounds that we had in Stellar Express like that, The sound design is phenomenal. The knowledge and expertise there to be known to be able to do that is very respectful. I have a lot of love for that. I thought it was very well stationed, and I suppose the other star of the show for me would be the drums. You know, within both of these tracks, we had interesting patterns on the kick, snares, and hi-hats there that never overstayed their welcome. They pocketed to an extent, but there was also some interesting sort of contra phrasings there, where we had maybe rhythms go for like an accord note groove, and other parts there with the synths or basses or whatever, they were kind of moving in a different time signature or something like that, or a different flow there. It makes it sound a little bit sort of like confusing and unusual, but it works in a specific scenario because of the fact that Orkle just knows how to stack him and knows exactly to not put another third rhythmic device in when there's already two, creating that sense of disillusionment there. There are natural builds as we put one instrument on top of another, but the theme overall, I think for both of these tracks, the theme was the instrument I was trying to recreate. For example, I engraved with the sonar, with the fact you could kind of hear the thing go whoa, 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 get loud and loud towards you. You could look at the art and think, wow, that actually sounds like a submarine. And the theme for the iron grave sounded kind of dire, as if we were in danger from getting exposed to it. It did kind of sound like we were going to be stuck in the ocean with that submarine with nowhere else to go. There were some parts where it sort of sounded a bit glorious, like the constant kind of fuzz there, almost like the light was opening up at the fact that you had to sort of deal with that thing in the first place. But, you know, there was still a lot of animosity with some of the other elements in the lower range there, which kind of gave you a sort of a sense of discomfort, and that was very, very important to the experience there. No crazy stuff technically, no fast solos or anything like that, but it was the chord choices and the ideas from the individual parts meshed together were what really sold it. And it was the same for Stellar Express. You know, like there was some kind of there's a bit of like again with like the reverbs and delays and stuff like that. We had a sense of fantasy within it. You know, when you weren't hearing the train sounds, it was almost like you're on top of the train and you were taking whatever the train had to tell you. I thought that was very creative. But after having a listen through the middle just to sort of like recalibrate a little bit, the stellar part in the middle sounded very kind of like unnerving and kind of disjointed and cranky and manic. And I think that was trying to sort of communicate that maybe the train was not the friend that you thought it was going to be. It's why I kind of like the fact that it became a little bit sort of quieter later on, as if maybe the fear was getting on the train in the first place, but then as later on we became used to the chaos. I'm not sure. It's just we had warble kind of wiggly parts going on there, some sort of like things that cut into each other, and there were some flat second intervals, things cut in octaves, and yeah, never mind. It really is a journey. I don't think having vocals would have improved either of these two tracks. I think we showed a fundamental understanding of music theory and composition here, and it was great to be able to experience a type of music I hadn't really heard before. It's very rare that I get songs trying to match the instruments that they're trying to talk, or the things that they're trying to talk about, and sort of to show that sort of innate level of symbolism. A lot of music is just, oh, I have guitars and bass and drums and pianos, and let's make a ballad, or let's make a rock song or something like that, or like a whatever genre. This isn't it. This is more of, how do I describe it without sounding utterly pretentious? I'd say this is art. I'd say this is a piece of artwork. We're trying to create a painting here, and I think we succeeded with both. Studio recording, mixing, and mastering, though, was stellar. I really appreciate the effort put into not only the automation of the volume of the instruments and the panning of them as well, going from right to left, such as with Stellar Express in the train. It's also just how we had a phenomenal amount of dynamic range. Things were not the same loudness the whole time. Things went from absolute silence to full on bore, like in the mid part of Stellar Express there. We had things, again, lovingly niched within the frequency spectrum. There were no weird resonant frequencies, even though there was lots of different sort of zany sort of settings on some of those synths and stuff like that. There were effects like chorus effects and flanging and phasing, all that kind of stuff. There were lots of different effects on these tracks, but it was still nice and loud without pumping. We had a great balance there, and I think this track would not nearly have been as effective if we hadn't had that sort of automation in post, so I'm thankful for the studio work as well. Ultimately, I think this was a good attempt at trying to create these ideas that the musician had and putting them into song in a way where you don't need words to be able to sort of fill in the gaps. I thought it was really well handled, and yeah, this is my review of these tracks from an act named Orkle, and hopefully you enjoyed them. If you did, please go show them some love on their various social medias and YouTube page, and stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as either how more than ever thought of crazy stuff going on in the world, and I'll catch you in the next review. Spiderhands out.